While millions watched them dominate on the court, these NBA superstars were fighting a different battle behind closed doors, one that would destroy careers, end lives, and expose the dark underbelly of professional basketball that the league desperately tried to hide. The numbers are staggering. Over $2 billion in combined career earnings lost, 7 lifetime bans that ended promising futures forever, 3 deaths directly linked to addiction, dozens of careers cut short by substances that promised escape but delivered only destruction. Welcome to Savage Case Files. Today we're exposing the most shocking NBA drug scandals you never heard about. From cocaine epidemics that nearly destroyed the league in the 1980s to tragic overdoses that claimed championship-winning stars and performance-enhancing drug cases that changed the game forever. These aren't just stories about failed drug tests or brief suspensions. These are stories about addiction, desperation, and the deadly price of fame. Stories about all-stars who traded their legacies for their next fix. About lottery picks who threw away generational wealth for a moment's high. About champions who survived the pressure of playoff basketball but couldn't survive the demons in their own minds. From Lamar Odom's near-death overdose that left him fighting for his life with multiple strokes, to the first lifetime ban in NBA history that sent tremors through every locker room in America, these cases reveal how the brightest lights in basketball became consumed by the darkest shadows of addiction. The league tried to bury these stories. Today, we're digging them up. Case 1. Lamar Odom. 2 NBA championships with the Lakers. A reality TV empire. Millions of adoring fans. Lamar Odom had everything a professional athlete could dream of. Until October 13th, 2015. When paramedics found him unconscious at a Nevada brothel, clinging to life after a cocaine and herbal Viagra binge that would end his basketball career forever. Odom's path to stardom seemed destined for greatness. The 6'10" forward possessed a rare combination of size, skill, and basketball IQ that made him invaluable to championship teams. He helped the Lakers capture back-to-back titles in 2009 and 2010, earning 6th Man of the Year honors and becoming a fan favorite for his versatility and clutch performances. But behind the championship celebrations and red carpet appearances with the Kardashian family, Odom was fighting a battle that would ultimately consume him. His cocaine addiction wasn't a secret to those closest to him. It was an open wound that had been bleeding for years. In 2001, early in his career, Odom failed a drug test and received a suspension that should have served as a wake-up call. Instead, it became the first public glimpse into a private war he was losing. Throughout his championship runs with the Lakers, Odom admitted later that he was regularly using cocaine, somehow managing to perform at an elite level while his body processed dangerous substances. The facade finally crumbled at the Love Ranch brothel in Crystal, Nevada. Odom had been partying for days, mixing cocaine with herbal Viagra supplements in a combination that proved nearly fatal. When staff found him unresponsive, his body was shutting down from multiple organ failures. The medical crisis was devastating. Odom suffered multiple strokes that damaged his brain function. His kidneys failed completely, requiring immediate dialysis. For days, doctors weren't sure if he would survive, let alone recover enough to live independently. His family gathered at his bedside, preparing for the worst possible outcome. The man who once dominated NBA courts was now fighting for basic motor functions. The strokes affected his speech, his coordination, and his memory. The kidney damage required ongoing treatment that would affect him for the rest of his life. His basketball career, which had already been declining, was officially over. Odom's overdose exposed the silent toll that fame and addiction had taken on one of basketball's most beloved figures. His children watched their father fight for his life, not understanding how the man they idolized had fallen so far. His ex-wife, Khloe Kardashian, rushed to his side, putting aside their divorce proceedings to help him through the crisis. The recovery process was long and painful. Odom had to relearn basic functions that most people take for granted. Walking, talking, and thinking clearly all required intensive rehabilitation. The man who once executed complex basketball plays now struggled with simple conversations. Lamar Odom never played professional basketball again. His last NBA game had already been played years earlier, but the overdose made his retirement permanent and tragic. The two-time champion became a cautionary tale about the dangers of addiction, even for those who seem to have everything. His story serves as a reminder that success on the court means nothing when you're losing the battle off it. Case 2. Michael Ray Richardson. February 25, 1986. The date that changed NBA history forever. Michael Ray Richardson, a four-time All-Star point guard, became the first player in league history to receive a lifetime ban under the NBA's anti-drug policy. His fall from grace didn't just end one career. It sent a message that would echo through every locker room in America. Richardson was everything the NBA wanted in a star during the early 1980s. Standing 6'5" with exceptional court vision and defensive instincts, he averaged over 8 assists per game during his peak years with the New York Knicks. Fans loved his flashy style and clutch performances, while teammates respected his leadership on the court. But Richardson was also playing during the NBA's darkest period, the cocaine epidemic that nearly destroyed professional basketball. The drug had infiltrated locker rooms across the league, turning promising careers into cautionary tales and threatening the sport's very survival. Richardson's first positive cocaine test came in 1983, resulting in a suspension that shocked the basketball world. The NBA's drug policy at the time offered players multiple chances for rehabilitation, reflecting the league's desperate hope that stars could overcome their addictions and return to form. After completing treatment, Richardson returned to the court and initially appeared to have conquered his demons. He continued playing at an all-star level, leading fans and team officials to believe that the worst was behind him. The NBA held him up as an example of successful rehabilitation. But cocaine's grip proved stronger than basketball's rewards. Richardson tested positive again, triggering another suspension and another round of treatment. The pattern was becoming clear. Talent alone couldn't overcome addiction, and second chances weren't always enough. The third positive test sealed Richardson's fate. Under the NBA's three-strike policy, there were no more opportunities for redemption. Commissioner David Stern, who was fighting to save the league's reputation during the cocaine crisis, had no choice but to implement the ultimate punishment. On that February day in 1986, Richardson became the first player banned for life from the NBA. The announcement sent tremors through every team facility, every agent's office, and every player's home. If a four-time All-Star could lose everything, no one was safe. The ban was more than just punishment. It was a declaration of war against drugs in professional basketball. Stern used Richardson's case to demonstrate that the league would sacrifice even its biggest stars to protect the integrity of the game. Richardson's teammates were stunned. Fans who cheered his spectacular plays now watched helplessly as their hero disappeared from the sport forever. The Knicks, who had built their offense around his playmaking ability, suddenly faced the reality of replacing an irreplaceable talent. The lifetime ban effectively ended Richardson's basketball career at age 30, during what should have been his prime years. He lost millions in future earnings and endorsement deals, but more importantly, he lost his identity as a professional athlete. Richardson's case became the NBA's nuclear option, a warning to every player that addiction would not be tolerated, regardless of talent or popularity. His ban marked the beginning of the league's aggressive stance against drugs, a policy that continues to shape professional basketball today. The first lifetime ban in NBA history proved that even all-stars aren't immune to the consequences of their choices. Case 3. Roy Tarpley. Roy Tarpley possessed the kind of basketball talent that comes along once in a generation. The 7-foot Dallas Maverick forward could handle the ball like a guard, shoot from anywhere on the court, and dominate the paint with equal effectiveness. But his extraordinary gifts on the basketball court couldn't save him from the demons that would ultimately claim his life. Drafted 7th overall by Dallas in 1986, Tarpley immediately showed why scouts had raved about his potential. His rookie season earned him a spot on the all-rookie team, and by his second year, he was averaging nearly 14 points and 12 rebounds per game, while showcasing skills that defied his position. The Mavericks built their future around Tarpley's versatility, envisioning him as the cornerstone of a championship contender. His combination of size, athleticism, and basketball IQ made him virtually unstoppable when he was focused and healthy. Teammates marveled at his ability to take over games in ways that few big men could match. But Tarpley was fighting battles that his teammates couldn't see. Cocaine and alcohol had become constant companions, substances that promised to ease the pressures of professional basketball, but instead created new problems that threatened everything he had worked to achieve. His first suspension came in 1989 for violating the league's substance abuse policy. The Mavericks and NBA officials hoped that treatment and rehabilitation would help Tarpley overcome his addictions and return to his all-star form. The talent was undeniable. Everyone wanted to believe that recovery was possible. Tarpley did return to the court, and for brief moments, he showed flashes of his former brilliance. But the addictions that had derailed his career once weren't going to disappear simply because he had served his suspension. The cycle of relapse and consequences was just beginning. Multiple suspensions followed as Tarpley repeatedly failed drug tests and violated the terms of his rehabilitation agreements. Each suspension was longer than the last, reflecting the NBA's growing frustration with his inability to stay clean despite having access to the best treatment programs available. The Dallas organization stood by their troubled star longer than most teams would have, recognizing that his talent was irreplaceable when he was healthy and focused. But patience has limits, even for generational talents, and Tarpley's continued violations eventually exhausted every opportunity for redemption. In 1991, Roy Tarpley received a lifetime ban from the NBA, joining Michael Ray Richardson as only the second player to face the league's ultimate punishment. His career was over at age 26, during what should have been his prime years as a dominant force in professional basketball. The ban marked the end of Tarpley's basketball career, but not the end of his struggles with addiction. The substances that had cost him millions of dollars and a promising future continued to control his life long after his final NBA game. On January 9, 2015, Roy Tarpley died from liver failure at age 50. The cause was directly linked to years of alcohol abuse that had ravaged his body and ultimately claimed his life. The man who once dominated NBA courts had lost his final battle with the addictions that had haunted him for decades. Tarpley's death served as a sobering reminder that talent, money, and opportunity mean nothing when addiction takes control. He had everything: skill, support, and countless chances for redemption, but addiction proved stronger than all of it. Case 4. Chris Washburn. Chris Washburn's NBA career can be measured in the cruelest possible terms: 72 games. That's all it took for the third overall pick in the 1986 draft to go from franchise cornerstone to lifetime ban, making him one of the biggest draft busts in basketball history, not because he lacked talent, but because cocaine destroyed everything before he could prove his worth. Standing 6'11" with impressive athleticism and scoring ability, Washburn was supposed to be the future of whichever team was lucky enough to draft him. The Golden State Warriors saw him as their missing piece, a big man who could run the floor and create matchup problems for opposing defenses. Washburn's college career at North Carolina State had already been marked by academic struggles and off-court issues. But NBA scouts focused on his physical tools and basketball potential. The league was full of players who had overcome difficult backgrounds to achieve greatness, and many believed Washburn would follow that same path. His rookie season in 1986-87 showed flashes of the talent that had made him such a coveted prospect. Washburn averaged 8.1 points and 4.7 rebounds per game, while adjusting to the speed and physicality of professional basketball. The Warriors remained optimistic about his development and long-term potential, but cocaine had already taken hold of Washburn's life, creating problems that would prove impossible to overcome. The drug that was ravaging NBA locker rooms throughout the 1980s found another victim in the young center, who was ill-equipped to handle the pressures and temptations of professional sports. Washburn's first failed drug test came during his second season, triggering the NBA's substance abuse protocol and mandatory treatment. The Warriors hoped that early intervention would save their investment and help Washburn realize his potential before it was too late. The treatment programs and rehabilitation efforts proved ineffective. Washburn continued using cocaine despite knowing that his career hung in the balance with every decision he made. The addiction had become stronger than his desire to play basketball at the highest level. Multiple failed drug tests followed, each one bringing Washburn closer to the ultimate punishment that had already claimed Michael Ray Richardson and Roy Tarpley. The NBA's three-strike policy left no room for continued violations, regardless of talent or potential. In 1989, after just 72 NBA games spread across parts of 3 seasons, Chris Washburn received a lifetime ban from professional basketball. He was 24 years old, theoretically entering his prime years as an athlete, but his career was over before it had truly begun. The Warriors lost their 3rd overall pick and millions of dollars in investment. Washburn lost everything: his career, his earning potential, and his identity as a professional athlete. The cocaine that had promised escape from pressure had instead eliminated every opportunity for success. Years later, Washburn spoke openly about his struggles with addiction, acknowledging the mistakes that had cost him his NBA career. His honesty provided insight into the destructive power of cocaine and the challenges facing young athletes who lacked the support systems necessary to handle fame and fortune. Washburn's story serves as a reminder that talent means nothing without the discipline and support necessary to nurture it. In just 72 games, he went from franchise savior to cautionary tale, proving that even the most promising careers can be destroyed by poor choices and addiction. The 3rd overall pick, who was supposed to anchor a franchise for years, instead became a footnote in NBA history: 72 games and out. Case 5. O.J. Mayo. O.J. Mayo was supposed to be the next great NBA scorer. The 3rd overall pick in the 2008 draft possessed a deadly jump shot, explosive athleticism, and the kind of confidence that separated stars from role players. Instead, he became a cautionary tale about how quickly promise can turn to exile. From lottery pick to league pariah in just 8 devastating years. Mayo's arrival in Memphis generated the kind of excitement reserved for franchise-changing talents. The Grizzlies had struggled for years to find a consistent scoring threat, and Mayo's college highlights suggested he could be their answer. His rookie season validated that optimism as he averaged 18.5 points per game and earned all-rookie honors. The early years showed flashes of brilliance that reminded everyone why Mayo had been drafted so high. He could score from anywhere on the court, create his own shot under pressure, and take over games when his team needed him most. Memphis fans began dreaming of playoff runs built around their young star's scoring ability. But Mayo's off-court life was becoming increasingly problematic. The pressures of professional basketball, combined with the temptations available to young millionaires, created an environment where poor decisions seemed inevitable. The warning signs were there, for those who knew where to look. In 2011, those warning signs became public when Mayo was suspended 10 games for testing positive for DHEA, a banned performance-enhancing substance. The suspension was Mayo's first major brush with the NBA's drug policy, and it should have served as a wake-up call about the consequences of violating league rules. Mayo served his suspension and returned to the court, but the incident had damaged his reputation around the league. Teams began questioning his judgment and professionalism, concerns that would follow him as he moved from Memphis to Dallas and eventually to Milwaukee. The real disaster struck in 2016, when Mayo was dismissed and disqualified from the NBA for violating the anti-drug program with what was presumed to be cocaine or a similar drug of abuse. This wasn't a performance-enhancing substance or a minor violation. This was the kind of serious drug offense that ended careers permanently. The dismissal came with a 2-year ban and no guarantee of reinstatement, effectively ending Mayo's NBA career at age 28. The league's message was clear. Drug abuse violations would not be tolerated, regardless of talent or potential. Mayo joined the growing list of players who had thrown away millions for temporary highs. The ban forced Mayo into basketball exile, watching from overseas as his former peers continued their NBA careers. He eventually found opportunities to play internationally, but the money, prestige, and competition level couldn't compare to what he had lost. Mayo's fall from grace was particularly shocking because of how quickly it happened. In 2008, he was a lottery pick with unlimited potential. By 2016, he was banned from the league and playing in obscurity overseas. 8 years was all it took to go from franchise cornerstone to cautionary tale. The Milwaukee Bucks, who had signed Mayo hoping to revitalize his career, lost their investment and had to explain to fans why their newest acquisition was suddenly banned from basketball. Mayo lost not just his current contract, but any chance of earning the hundreds of millions that elite scorers command in the modern NBA. From lottery pick to league pariah in 8 years, O.J. Mayo's story proves that talent without discipline is just wasted potential waiting to be destroyed. Case 6. Richard Dumas. Richard Dumas had the talent to help an NBA team reach the finals. He also had a cocaine addiction that would ensure he never got to enjoy that success. His story is one of the most frustrating what-ifs in basketball history. A player who proved he could perform at the highest level, but couldn't stay clean long enough to build a lasting career. Drafted by the Phoenix Suns in 1991, Dumas never played a single game during his rookie season. The reason wasn't injury or lack of skill. It was a substance abuse violation that sidelined him before his professional career could even begin. The Suns had invested a draft pick in a player who was already battling demons that threatened to destroy his future. The missed rookie season should have been a wake-up call for Dumas and the organization. Instead, it became the first chapter in a tragic story of wasted potential and repeated failures. The Suns stood by their troubled prospect, hoping that treatment and time away from basketball would help him overcome his cocaine addiction. When Dumas finally took the court for the 1992-93 season, he showed exactly why the Suns had been willing to wait. His athleticism, scoring ability, and basketball instincts were undeniable. He could create his own shot, defend multiple positions, and contribute in ways that helped winning basketball teams succeed. That season, Dumas played a crucial role in Phoenix's remarkable run to the NBA Finals. The Suns, led by Charles Barkley and supported by players like Dumas, captured the imagination of basketball fans with their high-scoring, entertaining style of play. Dumas had proven that he belonged on the sport's biggest stage. The Finals appearance represented the pinnacle of Dumas' basketball career. He was playing meaningful minutes for a championship contender, contributing to victories against the best teams in the world. For a brief moment, it seemed like his talent had overcome his personal struggles. But cocaine addiction doesn't disappear simply because someone achieves success on the basketball court. The same demons that had cost Dumas his rookie season were still present, waiting to destroy everything he had worked to rebuild. The Finals run would prove to be the highlight of a career that was about to collapse. Dumas's ongoing addiction issues continued to derail his career even after proving he could play at the highest level. Multiple violations of the league's substance abuse policy followed, each one making it harder for teams to justify keeping him on their roster, despite his obvious talent. The pattern became predictable and heartbreaking. Dumas would show flashes of brilliance on the court, then disappear due to drug suspensions or violations. Teams would give him chances based on his ability, only to watch him waste those opportunities through poor decisions and continued substance abuse. His NBA career effectively ended not because he couldn't play basketball, but because he couldn't stay away from cocaine long enough to maintain his eligibility. The same addiction that had cost him his rookie season eventually cost him his entire professional career. After basketball, Dumas faced legal troubles that stemmed from his continued struggles with addiction and poor decision-making. The man, who had once helped a team reach the NBA Finals, found himself dealing with criminal charges and the consequences of a life that had gone completely off track. Richard Dumas proved he could play at the highest level of professional basketball. But he also proved that talent means nothing without the discipline and support necessary to maintain it. His Finals appearance remains a reminder of what could have been if addiction hadn't won the battle for his future. Case 7. Chris Andersen. In a list filled with tragic endings and wasted potential, Chris Andersen stands alone. The tattooed, mohawk-wearing center known as Birdman accomplished something that seemed impossible in the modern NBA. He came back from a drug-related dismissal to win an NBA championship. His story proves that redemption is possible, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Andersen's early NBA career with the Denver Nuggets showed promise but lacked consistency. The athletic big man could block shots, run the floor, and energize crowds with his intensity, but he struggled to find a defined role that maximized his unique skill set. His potential was obvious, but so were his limitations as a traditional center. In 2006, Andersen's career came to a crashing halt when he was dismissed from the NBA for violating the league's anti-drug policy for drugs of abuse. The violation wasn't for performance enhancers or minor substances. This was the kind of serious offense that had ended careers permanently for players like Michael Ray Richardson and Roy Tarpley. The dismissal meant Andersen was banned from playing in the NBA indefinitely, with no guarantee that he would ever be allowed to return. At age 28, during what should have been his prime years as a professional athlete, Andersen found himself completely shut out of the league he had worked his entire life to reach. Most players who face drug dismissals never make it back to the NBA. The combination of lost conditioning, missed development time, and damaged reputations creates barriers that prove impossible to overcome. Andersen faced all of these challenges while dealing with the personal issues that had led to his dismissal in the first place. But Anderson used his time away from basketball differently than most banned players. Instead of giving up or making excuses, he committed himself to addressing the problems that had derailed his career. He worked on his conditioning, refined his skills, and most importantly, dealt with the substance abuse issues that had cost him everything. The NBA's reinstatement process is rigorous and unforgiving. Players must prove not only that they've addressed their substance abuse problems, but also that they can be trusted to represent the league professionally. Anderson spent 2 years in basketball wilderness, working to convince officials that he deserved another chance. In 2008, the NBA reinstated Chris Anderson, making him one of the few players ever to return from a drug-related dismissal. The Denver Nuggets welcomed him back, but Anderson knew that this was likely his final opportunity to prove he belonged in professional basketball. Anderson's return to the court was nothing short of remarkable. He played with the intensity and focus of someone who understood how close he had come to losing everything permanently. His shot blocking, rebounding, and energy became valuable assets for teams looking for defensive presence and veteran leadership. The ultimate validation came in 2013, when Anderson signed with the Miami Heat and helped them win the NBA championship. The same player who had been dismissed from the league just 7 years earlier was now celebrating on basketball's biggest stage, holding the Larry O'Brien Trophy above his head. Anderson's championship ring represents more than just team success. It symbolizes the possibility of redemption in a league that rarely offers second chances for drug violations. He proved that with commitment, hard work, and genuine change, even the most serious mistakes can be overcome. Chris Anderson remains the only player on this list who truly beat his demons and achieved success after a drug-related dismissal. His story stands as proof that redemption is possible, even when the path seems impossible to navigate. Case 8. Joakim Noah. Joakim Noah was the heart and soul of the Chicago Bulls during their most successful years of the 2010s. The former Defensive Player of the Year and 2-time All-Star had built his reputation on relentless effort, defensive intensity, and an unbreakable will to win. But in 2017, at age 32, Noah made a decision that would accelerate his career's decline and tarnish his legacy forever. Noah's peak years with the Bulls were defined by his incredible motor and defensive prowess. He anchored championship-contending teams alongside Derrick Rose, earning recognition as one of the league's premier centers through pure hustle and basketball IQ, rather than overwhelming physical gifts. By 2016, however, Noah's body was breaking down from years of punishing play. Multiple shoulder surgeries, knee problems, and other injuries had robbed him of the athleticism that made him effective. The player who once dominated through energy and effort was struggling to keep up with younger, healthier opponents. Noah signed a 4-year, $72 million zero-cents contract with the New York Knicks in 2016, but his performance was a shadow of his former self. The injuries had taken their toll, and Noah was clearly fighting to extend a career that seemed to be slipping away with each passing game. Facing the reality of his declining abilities, Noah made a fateful decision. In March 2017, he tested positive for selective androgen receptor modulator, SARM, LGD-4033, a performance-enhancing drug that was banned under the NBA's anti-drug policy. The positive test resulted in a 20-game suspension that would sideline him for the remainder of the season. Noah's defense was that he had unknowingly consumed the banned substance through over-the-counter supplements he was taking to aid his recovery from shoulder surgery. He claimed the supplements were recommended as part of his rehabilitation process and that he had no intention of gaining an unfair competitive advantage. The NBA was unmoved by Noah's explanation. The league's policy places the responsibility on players to ensure that any substances they consume are legal under the anti-drug agreement. ignorance or accidental consumption are not acceptable defenses for positive drug tests. The 20-game suspension was devastating for Noah's reputation and career trajectory. The player who had built his identity on playing the game the right way was now labeled as someone who had tried to cheat to extend his career. The suspension cost him approximately $2 million in salary and damaged his standing around the league. More damaging than the financial penalty was the impact on Noah's legacy. He had been respected throughout his career as a player who maximized his abilities through hard work and determination. The PED suspension suggested that even Noah felt he needed artificial enhancement to compete at the NBA level. The suspension effectively marked the end of Noah's meaningful NBA career. He played sparingly for the Knicks after returning from the suspension, and his performance continued to decline. Teams around the league viewed him as damaged goods, an aging player with injury problems and a PED violation on his record. Noah's case highlighted the desperation that aging players feel as their careers wind down. Even former All-Stars and Defensive Players of the Year aren't immune to the temptation of performance-enhancing drugs when facing the end of their professional basketball lives. The irony of Noah's situation was particularly cruel. The player who had earned millions through defensive intensity and effort had resorted to banned substances to try to recapture abilities that time and injuries had stolen from him. Even former All-Stars aren't immune to PED temptation when their careers are slipping away and desperation takes hold. Case 9. Zach Randolph. Zach Randolph had spent 17 years building one of the most respected careers in NBA history. Known as Z-Bo to fans across the league, the power forward had earned over $200 million through hard work, consistency, and a blue-collar approach that made him beloved in every city he played. Then, on August 9, 2017, a single night in Los Angeles changed everything. Randolph's career had been defined by professionalism and reliability. From his early days in Portland to his championship-contending years in Memphis, he had maintained a spotless reputation both on and off the court. Players, coaches, and fans respected him as someone who approached basketball with the right attitude and values. The Memphis Grizzlies had retired his jersey, honoring him as one of the most important players in franchise history. Randolph had helped transform the Grizzlies from a struggling expansion team into a playoff contender, earning the love and admiration of an entire city through his commitment and performance. At age 36, Randolph was in the twilight of his career, having recently signed with the Sacramento Kings for what many expected to be his final NBA season. He was preparing to transition from active player to respected veteran, someone who could mentor younger players and contribute wisdom gained from nearly 2 decades of professional basketball. That August night in Los Angeles shattered Randolph's carefully built reputation in a matter of hours. Police arrested him during a traffic stop and discovered a significant quantity of marijuana in his possession. Enough to suggest this wasn't personal use, but potential distribution. The charges were serious. Possession of marijuana with intent to sell. This wasn't a minor drug possession case that could be dismissed or overlooked. The amount of marijuana found suggested that Randolph might have been involved in dealing drugs, a revelation that shocked everyone who knew him. The arrest made national headlines, with sports media struggling to reconcile the respected veteran they knew with the criminal charges he was facing. Randolph had never been associated with drug dealing or serious legal troubles, making the arrest even more surprising and damaging. Randolph's legal team immediately went to work, negotiating with prosecutors to reduce the charges and minimize the damage to his reputation and career. The defense argued that the charges were excessive and that Randolph was not involved in any large-scale drug distribution operation. Eventually, the charges were reduced through plea negotiations, allowing Randolph to avoid the most serious consequences of the original accusations. But the damage to his reputation was already done. The arrest had cast a shadow over what had been an exemplary 17-year career. The Sacramento Kings stood by Randolph initially, but the arrest created an uncomfortable situation for the organization. They had signed a respected veteran to provide leadership and professionalism, not someone who would generate negative headlines and legal complications. The marijuana bust raised uncomfortable questions about what fans and organizations really knew about the players they celebrated. Randolph had been viewed as one of the NBA's most trustworthy veterans, yet he was facing drug charges that suggested a completely different side to his personality. For Randolph personally, the arrest represented a devastating blow to a legacy he had spent nearly 2 decades building. The respect he had earned through consistent performance and professional behavior was now overshadowed by criminal charges and questions about his judgment. The case highlighted how quickly a respected career can be damaged by poor decisions. Randolph had survived 17 years in the NBA without major controversy, only to face serious legal troubles as his career was winding down. How do you explain to your grandchildren that the respected veteran they admired was arrested for drug charges that suggested he might have been dealing marijuana? Case 10. Don McLean. Don McLean never intended to make NBA history, but on March 25, 2000, he became the first player ever suspended for performance-enhancing drugs in league history. His 5-game suspension for steroid use opened a door that would fundamentally change how professional basketball approached drug testing and forever alter the landscape of the sport. McLean was a journeyman center who had bounced between teams throughout his NBA career, never quite establishing himself as a star, but managing to carve out a role as a reliable backup. At 6'9", with solid fundamentals, he was the type of player teams valued for his professionalism and ability to contribute when called upon. The NBA's drug testing program in 2000 was primarily focused on recreational drugs like cocaine and marijuana, substances that had plagued the league throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Performance-enhancing drugs weren't considered a major threat to basketball, unlike in sports like baseball and cycling, where steroid use was becoming a significant concern. McLean's positive test for nandrolone, an anabolic steroid, caught league officials completely off guard. The NBA had protocols in place for cocaine and other street drugs, but steroids represented a new category of violation that required different responses and consideration. The discovery forced the NBA to confront uncomfortable questions about performance-enhancing drug use among its players. If a journeyman like McLean was using steroids, how many other players might be seeking chemical advantages to extend their careers or improve their performance? McLean's defense was that he had unknowingly consumed the banned substance, possibly through contaminated supplements or other products he was using for legitimate training purposes. He maintained his innocence and claimed he had no intention of cheating or gaining an unfair advantage over his opponents. The NBA was faced with a precedent-setting decision. How the league handled McLean's case would establish the framework for all future performance-enhancing drug violations. The punishment needed to be significant enough to deter other players, while being fair to someone who claimed innocence. The 5-game suspension was relatively light compared to the lifetime bans handed out for cocaine violations, but it sent a clear message that the NBA would not tolerate performance-enhancing drug use. The league was drawing a line in the sand before steroid use could become widespread. McLean's case prompted the NBA to strengthen its drug testing protocols and expand its focus beyond recreational drugs. The league realized that performance-enhancing substances posed a different but equally serious threat to the integrity of professional basketball. The suspension effectively ended McLean's NBA career, as teams became reluctant to sign a player associated with steroid use. He had become a cautionary tale about the risks of using banned substances, even for players who claimed they were unaware of what they were consuming. More importantly, McClo's case opened the floodgates for modern performance-enhancing drug testing in professional basketball. His positive test led to expanded testing programs, stricter penalties, and increased awareness about the dangers of steroid use in the NBA. The league's response to McClain's violation established the foundation for current anti-doping policies that have caught numerous players over the past 2 decades. Every subsequent PED suspension can trace its origins back to the precedent set by McClain's case. Don McClain didn't know it at the time, but his 5-game suspension changed the NBA forever. He became the unwitting pioneer of a new era in professional basketball, one where performance-enhancing drugs would be monitored as closely as cocaine and marijuana. He didn't know it, but he changed the NBA forever with one positive test that opened a door the league could never close again. Case 11. Shawn Kemp. Shawn Kemp was one of the most explosive athletes the NBA had ever seen. The 6'10" forward could soar through the air with a grace that defied physics, throwing down dunks that left crowds speechless and opponents demoralized. But while fans marveled at his aerial artistry throughout the 1990s, Kemp was fighting a battle with cocaine that would silently destroy one of basketball's most promising careers. During his peak years with the Seattle Supersonics, Kemp was unstoppable. His combination of size, speed, and leaping ability made him a matchup nightmare for opposing teams. He could run the floor like a guard, post up smaller defenders, and finish above the rim in ways that few players in NBA history could match. The Supersonics built their championship aspirations around Kemp's unique talents. Paired with point guard Gary Payton, Kemp formed one of the most dynamic duos in professional basketball. Their 1996 run to the NBA Finals showcased Kemp at his absolute peak, dominating games with a ferocity that seemed unstoppable. But behind the highlight reel dunks and all-star appearances, Kemp was using cocaine regularly. Unlike other players whose drug use resulted in suspensions and public scandals, Kemp managed to avoid detection by league testing protocols. His addiction remained hidden from fans and officials, even as it began affecting his performance and conditioning. The decline started subtly. Kemp's explosive first step became less explosive. His vertical leap, once legendary, began to diminish. His conditioning, always a concern given his muscular build, became noticeably worse as the late 1990s progressed. Weight gain became the most visible sign that something was wrong with Kemp's approach to professional basketball. The lean, athletic frame that had made him so dominant began to expand, adding bulk that slowed his movement and reduced his effectiveness on both ends of the court. By the late 1990s, Kemp's performance had fallen off dramatically. The player who had once been considered one of the league's premier power forwards was struggling to maintain his starting position. Teams began questioning his commitment and professionalism, though they didn't know about the cocaine use that was undermining his career. Kemp's drug use never resulted in a positive test or official suspension, but the consequences were just as devastating as any formal punishment. His career trajectory, which had seemed destined for Hall of Fame consideration, instead became a cautionary tale about wasted potential and self-destruction. The Seattle Supersonics, frustrated with Kemp's declining performance and increasing weight, eventually traded him to Cleveland. The move was supposed to revitalize his career, but the change of scenery couldn't address the underlying problems that were destroying his abilities. Kemp's final NBA seasons were painful to watch for fans who remembered his dominance. The explosive athlete who had once terrorized opponents was now a shell of his former self, struggling with basic basketball fundamentals that had once come naturally. The cocaine addiction that had remained hidden throughout his career continued to affect Kemp long after his playing days ended. While he avoided the public scandals that destroyed other players' reputations, the drug use had stolen years from his prime and prevented him from achieving the greatness that his talent deserved. Kemp's story proves that drug use doesn't need to result in suspensions or headlines to destroy a career. Sometimes the most devastating consequences happen silently, robbing players of their abilities while the world watches their decline without understanding the real cause. What if he had stayed clean during those prime years when he seemed capable of dominating the league for a decade? Case 12. Eddie Johnson. Eddie Johnson's NBA career was respectable but unremarkable, a solid player who contributed to several teams over 8 seasons without ever becoming a star. But Johnson's story didn't end when he retired from basketball. Instead, it took a dark turn that would transform him from forgotten NBA veteran to career criminal, proving that some players never escape the demons that eventually consume their lives completely. Johnson played in the NBA from 1981 to 1989, bouncing between teams like the Kansas City Kings, Phoenix Suns, and Seattle Supersonics. He was the type of role player that every team needs, someone who could provide scoring off the bench, defend multiple positions, and contribute without demanding the spotlight. His basketball career ended not with fanfare or ceremony, but with a lifetime ban for violating the NBA's anti-drug policy. Johnson joined the growing list of players whose cocaine addictions had cost them their professional careers, but unlike some others, his story was just beginning its descent into true darkness. Most banned players struggle with the transition to life after basketball, but Johnson's post-career trajectory was uniquely destructive. The discipline and structure that professional basketball had provided disappeared, leaving him without the framework necessary to make positive decisions or avoid dangerous situations. Johnson's criminal behavior began with relatively minor offenses, but escalated quickly as his life became increasingly chaotic. The same addictive personality that had cost him his NBA career now drove him toward more serious criminal activities that would define the rest of his life. The charges against Johnson grew more serious over time, reflecting a man whose life was completely out of control. Drug possession evolved into more significant offenses, each arrest adding to a criminal record that bore no resemblance to his former life as a professional athlete. Johnson's multiple arrests painted a picture of someone who had lost all connection to the person he had been during his playing career. The professional athlete who had once been disciplined enough to compete at the highest level of basketball was now making decisions that destroyed any chance of redemption or recovery. The legal system became Johnson's new reality, with courtrooms replacing basketball courts and jail cells replacing team facilities. The man who had once traveled the country playing games in front of thousands of fans was now facing judges and dealing with the consequences of increasingly serious criminal behavior. Johnson's case represents the absolute worst-case scenario for former NBA players struggling with addiction and life after basketball. While other banned players found ways to rebuild their lives, or at least avoid serious criminal behavior, Johnson's path led only to more destruction and legal troubles. The transformation from NBA player to career criminal was complete and irreversible. Johnson had become everything that anti-drug advocates warned about when discussing the dangers of substance abuse. A cautionary tale about how addiction can destroy not just careers, but entire lives. His story serves as a reminder that lifetime bans from the NBA are often just the beginning of much larger problems. For players like Johnson, losing basketball was only the first step in a downward trajectory that would ultimately lead to a life defined by criminal behavior and legal consequences. The professional athlete who had once been paid to entertain fans had become someone whose actions endangered communities and required intervention from law enforcement. Johnson's complete fall from grace represents the darkest possible outcome for players who can't overcome their addictions. This is what happens when addiction wins completely. The transformation from NBA player to career criminal becomes inevitable and irreversible. The numbers tell a story that the NBA would prefer to forget. 12 careers destroyed, over $2 billion in lost earnings, 3 deaths directly linked to addiction, 7 lifetime bans that ended dreams before they could be fully realized, dozens of families torn apart by substances that promised escape but delivered only devastation. These weren't just statistics in a league office filing cabinet. They were human beings whose talents entertained millions while they fought battles that most fans never knew existed. Behind every highlight reel was someone struggling with demons that fame and fortune couldn't cure. The NBA's response to these scandals fundamentally changed professional basketball. The league that once turned a blind eye to cocaine use in the 1980s now operates one of the most comprehensive drug testing programs in professional sports. The lifetime bans that shocked the basketball world in the 1980s became the standard punishment for serious violations. But the human cost extends far beyond policy changes and testing protocols. Roy Tarpley died at 50 from liver failure. Lamar Odom suffered multiple strokes that ended his career and nearly claimed his life. Eddie Johnson descended from professional athlete to career criminal, proving that some falls have no bottom. The rare success stories, like Chris Anderson's championship redemption, only highlight how exceptional recovery truly is. For every Birdman who conquered his addiction and returned to glory, there are dozens of players who never found their way back from the darkness. These stories prove that addiction doesn't discriminate based on talent, wealth, or opportunity. All-stars and role players, lottery picks, and undrafted free agents, the drugs consumed them all with equal efficiency. Michael Ray Richardson's 4 All-Star appearances meant nothing when cocaine took control of his life. The families left behind carry scars that never fully heal. Children who watched their fathers transform from heroes to cautionary tales. Wives who stood by their husbands through multiple suspensions and failed rehabilitation attempts. Parents who buried sons whose talents should have guaranteed long, successful lives. The league's evolution from the cocaine-ravaged 1980s to today's comprehensive testing programs represents progress, but it came at an enormous cost. Every policy change was written in the blood of destroyed careers and wasted potential. Perhaps most tragically, many of these disasters were preventable. The warning signs were there: failed tests, behavioral changes, declining performance. But the culture of professional sports often prioritizes winning over wellness, creating environments where problems fester until they become catastrophic. The modern NBA has learned from these tragedies, implementing support systems and intervention programs that didn't exist during the league's darkest periods. But the scars remain, serving as permanent reminders of what happens when addiction meets fame without adequate support structure. Which case shocked you the most? Do you think the NBA did enough to help these players during their struggles? Could these tragedies have been prevented with better intervention and support systems? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more hidden sports scandals that reveal the dark side of professional athletics.